Earth 2048. We didn't listen. The fires came. The floods rose. Billions fell. But in our darkest hour, we looked up. Engineers, scientists, dreamers, they built what Earth could not sustain. Islands in the void, rotating worlds where humanity could begin again. Here we learned what Earth tried to teach us: unity, balance, sacrifice. But in the void, one mistake means extinction. Every breath, every heartbeat, every choice matters. 6 islands, 6 ecosystems, 1 humanity. And when we mastered this, we reached for the stars. Can we build a home among the stars? Or will we bring our demons with us?
Earth is burning and humanity is desperate. But in the 2048, we found a way to cheat death itself. Welcome to the Samir Show. I'm your host, Samir Mistry. Earth is dying, the climate is chaos, floods, fire, and humanity on the edge. But wait, it's a 20 to 48. We didn't just survive, we conquered the void. The engineer racing against the time, the scientist playing God with the biology, adventurers pushing into the unknown. The one questions haunt them all. Can we build home among the stars? So Richard Anderson imaging the world. He's got the science to back it up. So Richard, welcome to our story. How are you, sir?
I'm very good. Nice to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming again and join us. And we would like to know more about this book, Outbound Island in the Void. So today we're going to talk about this particular book and what we have written, what inspired you to write this book. And the viewers, if you miss our first episodes, that's regarding the first book of the evolution of the life that you can download from the Amazon. And if you didn't see the first episode, you can click above the link and you can watch it. So Richard, I want to start something that has been haunting me. Since I read your book, I have written that feels like the fiction for the humanity's future, right? So it's the most hopeful thing that I have read in a years. Was that intentional? Or it just kind of a hope? Can you just sneak up while you're writing?
Well, I guess I'm a hopeful person. So I always look at humanity and the crisis that societies have gone through in the past. And some of them have been biological. Some of them we have nearly approached extinction. About 70 million years ago, our population was down to a few thousand people in Africa. And that was probably as a result of a massive volcano eruption in the Indonesia archipelago, and that caused a winter, like a nuclear winter, an extended period where plants died off because the sun was blocked out and so forth. So that's a biological trauma that just about was our undoing. But we've done a lot ourselves to threaten our own survival.
Yeah.
Different societies throughout history. And I believe that's part of the way our minds evolved. That's part of our tribalism. We evolved in caves. We evolved as familial tribes. And so we were loyal to our family, to our tribal members, and then an outside group would often be viewed with suspicion, and on that scale. So that was kind of baked into our mental social evolution. Now, as societies grew, and I discussed this in the first book, how religion played a part in unifying societies, large societies and cultures. But it also caused friction between different religions and different areas, which continues today, which is a major problem for human society. So so that's our biological evolution, and that's our social evolution that has brought us to this place. Right now, we're faced with several inflection points. One of them is AI.
Mhm.
and it's going to interact with humans, with human intelligence, with the evolution of our brains, of our minds, of our thought process. So in unknown ways. So I think there is an aspect where it could be a positive thing, and I've tried to focus on the positive. First, there's going to be trauma,
Mm.
and then how do we rise as a like a phoenix out of the ashes of our own destruction?
Mm.
And so Outbound Islands in the Void is an attempt to show that, and I use as a model NASA in its early days, the Moon program, and it was the largest peacetime assembly of engineers and scientists working on a common goal in history. And I believe even to this day, it was a huge organization that was dedicated to putting a man on the moon or men on the moon before, actually, frankly, before our technology was fully ready. We were pretty lucky in what,
Yeah.
when you look at that event, it was we were on a shoestring. We were hanging by a thread. It was extremely dangerous, and we were very lucky. And we had this conglomeration of engineers working together, mathematicians, and so forth. And that was demonstrated with Apollo 13 and the fact that they could bring this crew back to Earth by their concerted effort, by their combined intelligence and knowledge. So I use that as a model. What if you took a system like that of people who were highly trained and highly dedicated and disciplined and built a society in space? Could that, first you would have the engineers and the scientists, the biologists and so forth. And later, as this society in space evolved, you would have the sociologists, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, and all of the other, the artisans, the music, everybody else.
Yeah.
Could you build a society that was more functional in space, and then use that template to start to solve some of the problems on Earth? So that's where I was going.
So do you think that right now is the how happening in the world, right? So all the natural disaster is happening.
Yeah.
The governments are broken down, right? Do you think right now it's a transition is already has been started, or we are
Yes.
moving towards or we are leaning towards that the future that you shown in your book?
I think the process has started on our downward trend.
Mhm.
And that's, I could be wrong, of course, but I wrote the book to uplift my own spirits too. I wanted to say, okay, we're in a mess right now. How would we get out of this? Could we get out of this? If we survive for another 250 years, will that be enough time for us to implement some of the things that I'm talking about in this book?
Yeah.
I think so, but we're going to suffer a lot before that time comes. And what most people don't realize about climate change is that the most damage climate change is going to cause is going to directly affect human societies. It's going to affect our economics. It's going to affect our survival, our quality of life. It's going to cause some extinctions, which we're already causing. They called our age the Anthropocene, which means there's a lot of man-caused extinctions, loss of habitat, and that sort of thing with a lot of different species. So that's already occurring anyway. Climate change is going to have its major impact on humanity. And if we were to go extinct because of extreme climate change, the planet would recover, the plants would do very well, the ecosystems would gradually rebound. And so the real concern here is not that life wouldn't continue on the planet, it's that we might not. And I think the first thing, and it's hitting us right now, is the economic damage with floods, with forest fires, with hurricanes, with the extremes of weather, and the droughts that are hitting a lot of the world more frequently than they did in the past. So it's causing famine, and that's going to get worse. So how do you put a positive spin on that? That's what I try to do with this book.
So in a 20 to 48, right? That exactly right now, if we calculate, is 224 years, right? So suppose if my great grandchildren might live in that world, how does it feel to architecting architecting someone's actual future?
Well, that's what we do, isn't it?
Hmm.
The decisions we make today impact our progeny,
Hmm.
and sometimes it's our children, our grandchildren, and sometimes it's future generations that we don't know about or can't envision yet. So, do we care about that? Do we care about our progeny, our future generations? Do we care about humanity in the future?
Hmm.
If we look at history, and disregarding the current events that are happening, our large sections of the Earth's population have lives that are much, much better than they were 100 years ago or
Hmm.
200 years ago. And if you look back into the Middle Ages, life was very hard for most people. And yes, you had kings and monarchs and church leaders and so forth that had a little better life. And if you go back to ancient times, the times of the Greeks and the Egyptians and those early societies, the Babylonians, there was a class of people that had a pretty good life, and some of these people lived long lives into the
Hmm.
90s, 80s and 90s, whereas most of the people would die off in their 40s and 50s, most of the population. But if you have a privileged life, even in those days, you lived longer. Now today, when we look at societies, the average lifespan has gradually increased over the centuries and over the decades.
Hmm.
We're facing some other problems today. We're facing problems with our food supply, toxins in our environment. There are some things that are starting to impact our longevity. But by and large, our life has improved and our lifespan has improved.
So while writing that book, do you feel somewhere that God, I hope I'm wrong about this particular part?
Oh yeah.
Okay, can
But
you
at
tell
this,
me which
yeah,
part that?
yeah, I hope I'm wrong about the fact that we're going to go down this rabbit hole to the point where we're going to lose a few billion people to
Mhm.
disease and famine and disease. They go hand in hand. But what we're seeing in various areas of the world is leading to famine. So a lot of the areas in Africa that are prone to drought, and they do have periodic famines, that's becoming more frequent, and the droughts are becoming more severe, and they last a little longer. So that impacts the food supply. It isn't to say that we don't have the ability to resolve these. We do today. We
Hmm.
produce plenty of food. And we have the technology that I discuss in this book of producing food that is probably more nutritious, better for us, and has a smaller impact on our environment. For example, there's a heavy demand for beef, for animal product. And I like that as much as anybody, but I'm trying to go more vegan, and even the impact on our fisheries is very severe. So overfishing and lack of regulation. So those food sources aren't sustainable. We have to go to a lower food base, lower on the evolutionary scale. And that technology is there. We have the ability to hydroponics is one example for plants. We also can produce. We can engineer microbes to produce what we want, the kind of proteins we want. So that technology is developing. And it's actually what you need are minerals, carbon dioxide, and sunlight or an energy source, and water. And in tanks, you can grow. You can grow, and this is what they're doing in space in my book. But that's possible today.
Right.
It could be scaled up. We could make. We're seeing impossible and improbable burgers and things like that.
Yeah.
Today, that's going to improve and increase to reduce our reliance on animal products, particularly beef. That's probably the least efficient food.
So according to you, in the future, there will be only the humans will be there, or that could be the animals also there. If there, then what kind of animals would be survive?
Well, our large large herbivores will probably be sequestered in game preserves, and they'll be just large enough populations to prevent, hopefully, to prevent extinction. As far as domestic animals, they contribute a lot of damage to the environment. So cattle, for example, produce a lot of methane, a lot of carbon dioxide, and on feedlots, they produce a lot of like ammonia and things that pollute the environment and pollute our water supplies and so forth. And sometimes when you have say organic lettuce, a recall for E. coli or something that's contaminating the produce, that liability should actually be borne by the ranchers, not the growers of the truck crops, because that's where the pollution comes from. It's from runoff from these animals. So if you look at the Mississippi River and it's dumping into the Gulf, it dumps a lot of pollution from pig farms.
Okay.
And they dam up the urine and the feces into big dams from these huge pig farm operations, and cattle. Same thing. And then when we have a big storm or a lot of rains and flooding, and those dams break and that leaks into the Mississippi River, it comes down the Gulf, and there is a plume that varies in size in the Gulf, a dead zone, because what's called the BOD, the biological oxygen demand, the ocean goes anaerobic, and fish die, and all other life forms except anaerobic bacteria die off. So those pollutants, they impact the environment. And cattle, they erode our natural habitats for wildlife, and particularly in the Amazon, where they cut down the rainforest and graze cattle or raise soybean. And that is, so right now the Amazon used to be a carbon sink. It used to absorb more carbon than it produced. It's just the reverse today. It produces more carbon, more CO2 than it absorbs in its plant life. Okay. So we have to change our food supply and our farming methods to return some of that land to natural habitat. That then will help support wildlife and pause or slow down extinctions. Extinctions will always happen.
So you have created like island in the void. So it's literally refuging the space after like Earth's climate disruption, right? So but there's not a escape pods. There's a homecoming stories that you mentioned in your book. Can you just talk me through that choice, that there is no pods, but that's a homecoming kind of thing? How we can build the homes in that like a habitats as you talk about, right? How we build that?
Well, it can't be built on Earth and sent up there. It's too large. So these spaced islands, they're made, they're rotating tin cans essentially.
Yeah.
They were proposed by O'Neill, Dr. O'Neill.
Yeah, O'Neill cylinders. Yeah.
70s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would have to be in the book I have some of the products coming from the moon. Some of this manufacturing would actually occur on the moon, and it would be launched into orbit around the moon by magnetic mass drivers. So you could picture I-beams, for example, steel I-beams that could be produced on the moon and then launched into orbit and then picked up by some orbiting spaceship and taken to where the construction site. Also, I have materials delivered from the asteroid belt. The problem with the asteroid belt is it's far away. It would take a long time to bring materials. So initially they're partially processed in the asteroid belt, and ultimately I think the goal would be to refine products more in the asteroid belt. So you're transporting less mass into closer Earth orbit. So that's the second danger when you launch these bundles of rock and stuff controlled by rocket motors, but still you're launching them into an inner orbit close to Earth. And if the rockets fail or something happens, you could launch them into a decaying orbit that would not the people on Earth would not appreciate.
Yeah.
So there is a danger in bringing these heavy objects in from the asteroid belt. But that's a source of a huge amount of material. And the other benefit from that is it's already, the rocks out there are already separated as to material. So you have some asteroids that are heavy in nickel and iron and the other heavier metals. And some of them they're called carbonaceous or C-type asteroids are mainly carbon, like big lumps of coal, and others that are like rocky with metal but lower amounts of metal, which would be more like what you see outside. So there's plenty of materials there to bring into a close orbit to Earth and build these structures. You would need a manufacturing facility in space, and you would need a lot of robotic power, a lot of artificial intelligence. It wouldn't be practical to have astronauts out there in big bulky spacesuits trying to put these things together. It just it's kind of been shown when we've tried to do repairs on satellites, and they had a mission early on to the Hubble Space Telescope.
Yeah.
And so a simple job is a huge effort for a human in a spacesuit. But robots, with the proper intelligence, that would be what you would have to do.
So you
would build these things.
Yeah, so you have woven together like engineers, scientists, and adventurers, each with a different stake in the survival. Which
Right.
characters surprise you? You take the most of the time to write them.
What? I didn't understand.
Which character among like engineer, scientist, and adventurer? So which character surprised you the most as you wrote?
Well, Ofelia was kind of my favorite. She is an artificial being that's coupled with the main character, and she is actually the hero of the story. And so I try to bring that artificial intelligence linked with the human mind into a human perspective. So she can sense emotions and different feelings through the Virgil's mind. But robot or artificial intelligence on its own, because of the way our brains evolved, because our brains are stacked actually. The more primitive brains are down by the brainstem on our own head, and it moves on up to the frontal lobes and the convoluted cortex. So our brains evolved in our natural environment over millions and billions of years. Artificial intelligence, and also we have sensory input that could not be mimicked in an artificial intelligence, as far as I understand, because our sensory input is tied to a nervous system it's influenced and tied to endocrine system. Our body mind operates as one, and with the chemistry and the hormonal interactions, all of this is a very complex thing that affects how we think and how our brain evolved and how our brain reacts to our environment, and especially sensually. So these robots can't. I get into this a little bit more in my next book, which is coming out in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
So robots, you can have sensors. If they move their arm, they have to have sensors so that they understand what the position of their arm is. Like we have a body sense where we can touch our nose with our finger with our eyes closed. So that's a body sense. We can sense where our arms and where our fingers are. So a humanoid robot would have to be able to do the same thing, and they would have accelerators and different sensors that they use in cell phone technology and existing robots today, robots that do all kinds of things. They have all kinds of sensors when they touch something. This is all in development, but they cannot feel pleasure. For example, they feel that maybe they can determine what the surface is. Is it a soft surface? Is it hard? Is it cold? Those sorts of things. But they can't sense an emotional feeling from the warmth of the sun or a kiss, which we take for granted.
Yeah.
That some of us, hopefully. So, robot or artificial intelligence, even when it's sentient, my thesis is in this book is going to be different from human,
Hmm.
unless it's somehow linked with our own mind. No, that's all fantasyful, but it's in a sense it's believable.
So now everyone says that in the future that robotics will take our own life, right? They will charge our life. What's your take in that? What's your take about that one? Will the robot will in charge our lives? Will they control our lives?
Yeah, that's a question on everybody's mind that's involved with artificial intelligence because presumably, well, not presumably, it's being shown that
Yeah.
artificial intelligence can deal with vast quantities of data,
Hmm.
can search through tons of data very quickly, can
Hmm.
pull out salient items from these big data sources. It can have perfect memory,
Hmm.
and mathematically, it can calculate things that we,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
yeah, we would take a long time if we could do it at all.
Yeah.
So in those areas, it can outperform us, and we will never reach that capacity as humans with our wet, gooey, gelatinous brain. It's just not. It's not designed for that kind of thought process.
Hmm.
So we do have an ability to make a decision and take an action based on limited information because that's how our environment presents us. We get a little bit of information. A lot of times we have to react to survive. So we have a better quality there maybe than artificial intelligence. But
Hmm.
the potential is that these, if they became sentient, self-aware, they wouldn't be self-aware in the same way that we are, and we don't even understand our own self-awareness. We're getting a handle on it, but we don't really understand it. But I don't think robotic or artificial intelligence would be self-aware in the same way that humans are. Well, they wouldn't have emotions. They wouldn't have jealousy, for example,
Hmm.
anger,
Right.
a fragile ego.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have the frailties of a human mind. So why would they? And they couldn't benefit from ownership of luxury items and
Hmm.
going to fancy restaurants and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. They couldn't benefit from that. So why would they have a motivation to overthrow us? One motivation would be we are very inefficient users of energy. It requires a lot of energy to make the food that we eat, especially in first world countries like the United States. It eats
Hmm.
a lot of beef, a lot of animal protein, and Western Europe and countries like Brazil that are big beef producers. South Africa, they eat tons of beef.
Yeah.
so
We have lots of.
it takes a lot of energy to bring those, per pound of beef. I don't know what it is, how many calories.
Hmm.
As you work your way up the food chain, it also consumes a ton of water. So the lower on the food chain you are, the less energy it takes to sustain you. Well, robots or artificial beings would thrive on electricity. They just need to plug in.
Right. Yeah.
Electricity can be produced by sunlight.
Hmm.
So there's a real shortcut. That energy is being produced anyway.
Hmm.
So why not utilize it? So there would be a huge difference in energy requirements to sustain humans or an equivalent number of, say, artificially intelligent robots. So from that standpoint, if it came to a place where their energy source was going to be threatened by our energy needs,
Hmm.
I could see where there would be a survival mode with artificial intelligence, and that's the one area right now that we don't really know, but it seems like it's going. These artificial intelligent beings aren't sentient today, but it seems like self-preservation is part of their algorithms, part of their neural net. part of what when they self-learn, they have an objective, they have a job to do, they have an assignment that is given them. They don't have the ability to evaluate the value of the assignment, only that that's their goal and that's their objective.
Okay.
And if that's threatened, then they may take action. It's been shown that there was a threat of blackmail.
Right. So according to your book, that who will be our enemy?
Yeah, I don't see how it could. There's the human reaction to this, the fear of something so powerful. So these robots could be made physically much more powerful than we are,
Right.
and mentally much more capable. So right there, we would probably have a natural fear. Or a tendency for a fear. It doesn't mean that that there would be necessarily be a danger, but it's definitely something to be concerned about.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the motivations, or one of the things you would have to do if you had a sentient robot, humanoid robot, you would have to assure that being that humans could not shut it down. Humans could not switch it off.
Wow. Okay.
So if it had assurance and it had a defensive mechanism that would prevent humans from destroying it, essentially, it wouldn't be a threat. As far if its own self-preservation was that threat, there could be a risk there.
Yeah.
These are interesting thoughts.
Yeah. So right now, see, the humanity is already dying. Right now, everywhere you can see, right? The world
Yes.
is right now is challenging itself. How do you represent humanity in the future? Did you see? Is there any chance of humanity in the future anywhere? How did you represent him?
Well, we're looking at doing a movie or a TV series on this book, the possibility, and in that sense, you have to bring out the bad forces for and then the good and evil and all of that.
Yeah.
But there is something positive about human evolution. And one thing is, if you can satisfy the basic human needs, okay, shelter, food, safety, and a reason for living, or an opportunity to explore and develop your interests and to make your own life valuable to yourself. If you can satisfy those things, you're going to reduce strife by orders of magnitude. It's the motivations, a lot of that is going to go away. So strife occurs and societies fall apart, like the French Revolution, when you have a huge disparity in wealth. And we're seeing that today and throughout the world, not just the United States. We're seeing the ultra rich becoming, wealth is more and more concentrated in the ultra rich. The middle class people who are in the comfort zone, they have their basic needs taken care of and their aspirations are a possibility. That group of people is shrinking, and the lower classes, the poverty level is increasing. That's going to get worse as our resources are more challenged and as our environment gets more disruptive. So, but the solution is twofold, I believe, and one is technology, the ability to provide the things that humans, and another one, and also to correct the damage and turn around the destruction we're doing to our own environment. Will that happen soon enough? That's kind of the big question. So will we fall into the abyss before we develop the means of climbing out? I don't think so, because we almost already have the means. We don't have the will or the unity to do it. If you put somebody in space, they're going to have the same objective. Survival is going to be difficult. They're going to all have a vested interest in maintaining the environment within this capsule in space. If they don't, they all die. They're going to have a vested interest in maintaining harmony in their society. If they don't, somebody could sabotage or that. So the motivation, I think, putting ourselves in that harsh environment where we have to do certain things cooperatively to survive will affect the way our brains develop, and our medical technology, as far as correcting genetic diseases and that includes mental deficiencies. There's a lot to do with the structure of your brain and how you think and whether or not you grow up to be a psychopath
Yeah.
or a nice person. The structure has a lot to do with it. It's not all environment. So
So if you
I
woke up,
do have hope.
yeah. So if you woke up tomorrow with the actual technology from your book, what's the first ecosystem you would create and where would you put it?
Well, the first ecosystem would be in water.
Okay.
The first would be water based,
Hmm.
and it would probably be diatoms because diatoms have a transparent shell made of silica gel.
Okay.
And so it's a highly efficient photosynthesizer, more than a normal plant, like you have in your background there,
Yeah.
the green leaves. Okay, a diatom is very efficient in converting and absorbing photons
Mhm.
and releasing oxygen. So that your main thing is you need to produce oxygen. And the second part is you need the animals, humans and other to breathe out the CO2 for the plants. So you have to have this balance between carbon dioxide and oxygen in the atmosphere. So diatoms are highly efficient at producing oxygen. So I would maintain water systems where diatoms can photosynthesize and produce oxygen. That would be the first step in establishing an environment. And later, then you add, once that's going and you have a correct atmosphere, then you start introducing plants to the surface, the inner surface of these spheres, the soil that you create. And some of the first plants, of course, aside from food plants, which would probably initially be both hydroponics and grown in vats and in barrels and tanks and so forth. But for construction inside, you would be growing two plants, in my view, that are highly renewable. One is bamboo, and the other is hemp. So bamboo can be used structurally, and so in this first base island, Alpha One, LE5 Alpha One, the first one that's built. The protagonist wakes up in the morning in his bamboo house on stilts. So you're in this enclosure, in controlled environment. You don't need a big building to protect you. The whole
Yeah, exactly.
environment is
Yeah.
compatible with your life. So bamboo structure, you cut down some bamboo, you can produce countertops, hardwood floors. You can produce a lot of things from bamboo. You can produce clothes. Hemp, you can produce clothes. It's much more efficient than, say, growing cotton.
Yeah.
You can harvest bamboo and it reappears the next day almost.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's a good source of building materials for what you'll need for living inside one of these spheres. And the other thing, so that's part of the environment. The other thing is you have to deal with your pollutants, with your recycle. So you don't want plastic containers and the system we have on Earth delivering food by trucks to all supermarkets and that kind of thing can't be. So what you would have is a direct farm to table, so to speak. So you wouldn't prepare your meals in your own habitat. You would go to central kitchens or restaurants that would be around, and food production would be a highly professional endeavor. You'd have to make sure the food had enough calorie, enough caloric value, had enough nutrition. So would be a lot of science behind food preparation. Chefs would be very important. How do you take this basic stuff and make something palatable, something and variety? So you would do that in central kitchens and supply restaurants. So you don't need containers to transport and so forth. It would be direct harvest to these food processing kitchens, and the waste products, of course, would be composted to produce your fertilizers to complete the carbon cycle. And if it became out of balance, where you're producing too much carbon dioxide because of the food waste or the impact of the bigger population, you could resort to an anaerobic process of decomposition where you don't release CO2, you produce something like hydrogen, which can be used to run motors to generate electricity. So there are a number of different technologies that could be used to control the atmosphere.
So did you show like how we recycle the wastage in your book also?
Not really. It's kind
Okay.
of implied, but in writing about something like that, it's like I'm going to write an article on this San Jose sewage plant. How many people are going to be interested in that? The local fecal factory.
Exactly.
So I did. It's in the background, but it didn't bring it to the forefront.
Okay, how does the love look like in a 2048, 20 to 48? How do you character find the intimacy when they're literally surrounded by the emptiness of the space?
How do I find what the
Like, how do you find the characters find intimacy when there's a
oh
literally surrounded by the emptiness of space?
well, I think that's why I built the archipelago. So I built and I proposed six of these rotating environments.
Mhm.
Each one would be styled after a different ecosystem on Earth.
Okay.
So and they might be different sizes, but they're all going to be in the book. They're like 2 kilometers in diameter by maybe 20 kilometers long. O'Neill's cylinders, I think his were 10 or 15 kilometers in diameter. They
Yeah.
were much bigger around. I just chose a number. There's no particular reason, but you would have different ones. It would be very easy to travel from one to another. Once you're in the same balance point. You're a gravitational balance point, and they're located so fairly close together, and they would be around the MAC facility, the manufacturing, assembly, and construction facility. So when you needed replacement parts for any a blender in the kitchen, or
Mm.
anything, it would be produced by this facility,
Mm.
and you would just go on your computer, put it in order, send them the specs, and they would do something like 3D printing
Mm.
and make it. They're already making rocket cones by 3D printing with using aluminum alloys. There's a company that does that. So I mean, it's going to go a long way in space colonies. You can't have a whole bunch of different kinds of assembly lines. You just have a bunch of 3D printers with different materials, source materials.
Mm.
Most of it would be metals, I would think. And of course, the technology we're assuming would be much more advanced. So you would have these basic little space shuttles, and they would be built in space by this facility, and you could travel between your various islands.
Mm.
And so if you wanted to take a vacation or a holiday, you could just schedule a trip to one of the other islands and a different environment. And you might be hiking in rainforest environment or something. Toward the end of the book, where we have, at the end of the book, actually, where we have a whole flotilla, they're floating in space, I guess, going to Alpha Centauri. And there are many different islands,
Okay.
and some of the islands are dedicated as veterinary islands, large animal, different Africa savanna, for example. And don't forget, you have the whole circumference of the inner surface of these islands it would be like usable space, usable land. It's all
Mm.
at standard gravity. So assuming we were going to go to Alpha Centauri with a huge fleet like this, we would want to take a lot of our Earth organisms with us. We'd want to take a lot of animals with us, I would think. We are tied to those organisms, to those lives. They are part of us. They came up evolutionarily from the same stock that we did. And I think psychologically they're important to our lives. We all bond with our pets.
Yeah.
If we own horses, I know people who are very bonded with their horse, and vice versa. The horse, is bonded. These are intelligent animals. They mourn their dead. So I would assume we would have zoological and botanical, probably together, islands if we were going to leave the solar system. And but that's how we would, I think, survive. We would maintain as much of what we experience on Earth as we could in space.
So, what current technologies or the movement give you the most hope of your timeline actually happening?
The biggest problems are is where science is most active right now, and that is with the human mind. There's the federal program. I don't know if it's been defunded or not, but it's the Connectome. It's similar to the genome, the project that was completed years ahead of time, which was to analyze the full human genome. The Connectome is orders of magnitude more complex. It's a huge project, but they're learning an awful lot. So also manipulating GMOs, the ability to manipulate biologics. Right now, the problem with that is our economic system. So the people who are paying the scientists to create GMOs are in the food industry, the big food producers, the big wheat producers and corn and what they're doing, and potatoes. What they're looking at is the bottom line. How can we get better yield on the crop that we're producing? So, for example, we can make the plants, the food plants, more resistant to pesticides, so that we can spray more pesticides to kill the weeds to get a higher productivity.
Correct.
But that's a highly contaminated crop. Or we can make potatoes that actually produce the pesticides themselves. So now we're eating that, but the company gets a higher yield of crop. So it's got kind of a bad rap because if you follow the money and look at the motivation, it's not for human health. It's for a massive. It's for the bottom line. It's for how much can you produce. Well, that can be that has been used to our benefit. It's been used with manipulating rice, producing something called golden rice, which adds nutrients that are lacking in regular rice, and it doesn't cost any more to grow it. It's grown the same way. So there's a lot of potential for improving our food supply through manipulating genetic manipulation. There's also some potential, and this is controversial, of manipulating our own bodies and mind. And that's further down the road. There's a lot of ethical issues there. But when you talk about, and I do in the next book, I talk a lot, I mentioned there is no such thing as a perfect human being. We all have flaws,
Right.
just because of the way we develop. But we can engineer a more perfect being, and some of it is as simple as taking toxins out of our environment and making sure the female during gestation is not exposed to agents that will cause harm to this developing fetus. So there's a lot of controversy all the time about what drugs are safe for pregnant women. What they don't drink alcohol, or they shouldn't take thalidomide for sure. But some of the toxins that are ingested are in our environment. You can't avoid them. In space, you probably could create an environment where you could avoid lots of toxins. You could also avoid a lot of parasitic diseases. You're in isolated colonies. You can have an isolated population. Germs or bacteria and viruses, they're going to continue to evolve. There'll always be a balance between human life and the lives of microbes. Okay, that's always going to be interrelated. But parasites that's a different animal altogether. And I believe in these space colonies, you could eliminate that aspect of humanity. You wouldn't have malaria. You wouldn't have Chagas disease. You wouldn't have what's the one that started in South America where you have microencephalus or whatever, a small head.
Yeah.
Your brain and head doesn't develop. It's a horrible disease, but it's a virus that affects the gestating female and affects the fetus drastically. So you remove all of those dangers that you can to a developing human in utero and in the environment as they're growing as a child. You're going to have a better a better human. Never perfect because of the way DNA unfolds.
Yeah.
You have differences, and the genetic code is not the final say. There's epigenetics. There's just the way, it's a probability kind of a thing. Quantum mechanics come. So we're never going to have a perfect human being, but we can get much better.
So how did you make like a medical ecosystem to cure the disease?
Well, I think that's already happening. It's just not available to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of technologies that are experimental right now, or not, say, FDA approved. They have to go through clinical trials and so forth. So it's a laborious process, and it's another way that artificial intelligence can help speed that process up. So what I mean is, for example, cosmetic industry used to test for allergens on their makeup products, for example, that they would clip rabbits' eyes open and spray whatever their product was in their eyes and look and see if there was a bad an effect. So they use animal testing as a template for, is this safe for human use? Let's test it on animals. That's largely gone away because we now can do that in vitro, which means in vivo is done within the body, in vitro is done in a test tube, outside the body. So most of that is done in vitro. What's evolved with computer technology is we're able to model more and more complex things mathematically. And so the effects of different medications, they're beginning to be able to predict the effects of medications using these mathematical models and algorithms and even invent, say, a new antibiotic or a new medication. If the algorithm understands the metabolism that you're trying to affect and can come up with a configuration for a protein that will interrupt whatever you want to interrupt, interfere or make the process better. That can be done at a beginning technology, but I can see that developing very rapidly. And so I think medicine will see a huge advancement in the near future. I think that's going to be a factor and of course that's my background. I've seen evolution of technology, and it's accelerating. And the convergence of computer technology, biological technique or technology has accelerated this whole process.
Okay, now let's play a game. Like, if the world leaders calls you tomorrow asking for your blueprint from your book, you get to implement one system or technology immediately. What do you choose and why?
What do I choose to?
Yeah.
I think I would give the whole thing to experts. I say,
So lots of budget.
I can't do it myself. Here's some ideas. You guys work out the details. See, that's the thing with science fiction is you're at a higher level than a practical level. So I talk about some technologies in my Mars book that's coming out that may not be practical, but the concept is real. The science or the physics is real, but is it a practical solution? I don't really know. I would have to leave that up to the engineers, and they'd work it out and go like, God, this is not going to work. So I think I think science fiction authors sometimes they hit the nail on the head. Sometimes they make a prediction. What was the author? 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or James Orwell. Anyway, the book 20,000 Leagues Under the Seas. He predicted nuclear power.
Okay.
He didn't name it. He didn't know what it was. He talked about this energy source. Well, they knew enough physics then that they knew there was an interchange between matter and energy, and you could convert matter to energy. It's not like burning wood. That's converting one element to another. That's changing matter, but it's not it's not destroying or changing matter into energy directly. So he predicted that. But many times science fiction is way off base. And so somebody has an idea, and depending on their scientific background, they may be on target or not. And sometimes the mechanism used is just for the storytelling, like in Star Trek. They needed a way to get people from the Starship Enterprise to the surface of some planet without having to redo the shuttle thing every time, you know. So they invented the transporter beam. You just stand here and we'll do some light effects, and all of a sudden you're on the surface. So it doesn't make any sense scientifically. I mean, it does have a vague concept that you disassemble the atoms and you reassemble. You somehow store the template for a human body in this computer, you know, and then you regenerate it from elements that are present at the different locations. So that concept is plausible, I would say. Disney had a word for that called the plausible impossible. Yeah. So they constructed that just for movie making, you know, just because they needed a mechanism. Not that it was likely to or possible, but their cell phone was, you know, their flip phone. Beam me up, Scotty. You know, that was at the first when that came out. Everybody goes, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And it was only a few, not many years later that they came out with the cell phone. Yeah. So that was Star Trek was what, in the late 60s, 70s, the first episodes. Yeah. And the cell phones started coming out in the 80s.
Yeah, 80s.
Yeah.
So 50 years from now, that if someone finds a time capsule with just this book inside, what do you hope they will understand about who were in a 2024 and who we believed that would become?
25 years from now? I think they would hope that, you know, assuming that 25 years from now we'll be worse off than we are today. I think they would look back at where we start. I reference a lot to like the Amazon. Okay, how it was before, and they're teaching their children. Okay, this is what it is now, but this is what it was, you know, a number of decades ago. And I think they would look at this and reflect back on what was lost. But there was hope, and some of these extinctions, a few of them, and a few of the recent ones could be reversed with our knowledge of genetics and with our ability of, you know, they're trying to bring back the dodo bird. And it's more for, can we do it? Than are we going to populate the world with dodo birds? They kind of brought back this, I forget the name of this wolf that was extinct. And it's not exactly what it was, the animal that went extinct, but it's close, because they have to use a surrogate wolf to raise or to incubate this. They have to use living cells, and then they have to make the genetic material using or modify existing genetic material to the codes that they have for this wolf. So it's not identical, but it looks quite a bit like. And so I think some species we may actually preserve in database where it's become very cheap and very efficient to analyze and sequence DNA code. And so without the ability or the budget to rejuvenate a lot of species, they could be preserved in database.
So do you believe that we should, or in the future, that we can or we are able to do the cloning of that species?
Cloning has not worked well. Basically, I think you need to go through the process of meiosis, which means two haploid cells. So if you had two different animals, well, then it's set because you're getting a different DNA, a different from the pool. You're getting a broader pool. So cloning, the way it's been done, the offspring doesn't have a long life. In fact, the aging is almost mirrors the aging of the parent. So what was the first sheep that was cloned? Anyway, that was the case. It didn't live that long. That isn't to say that you that you through manipulation. If you have a data bank, a large data bank, say, of the range of genetic variation within a species, so you have a large data bank of say, buffalo, of their population, then you could take a clone, or you could take the DNA from a female or a male, but you could take that and you could separate it like meiosis, and then you could modify one half to, well, actually you could modify both halves and draw from the database and make point mutations where it would match some other animal that had lived in the past. So theoretically, I think you could maintain diversity in a species through a type of clone.
Okay. Now let's have a rapid fire round. I'll ask you 10 questions, only the one word option. Okay. This is the last option. So Earth in 20 to 48, healing or transform?
Transform.
Biggest threat to space colony, isolation or technology?
Isolation.
Your writing fuel, coffee or wine?
Wine. Well, no, actually coffee.
Okay.
I would like it to be wine.
Okay. 20 to 48, greatest invention, biological or mechanical?
Biological.
Characters you would date, engineer or adventurer?
Adventurer.
Books, hidden message, hope or warning?
Both.
Both, okay. Real 2024 worry, climate or AI?
Probably climate.
Okay. Your Mars colony job, builder or explorer?
Builder.
Book, sequel chances, definitely or maybe?
Maybe.
Okay. Humanity's future, bright or complicated?
It's got to be complicated.
I hope so. Humanities always be complicated.
That's it. Yeah. It could be bright, but it's definitely going to be complicated.
Yes. So thank you, Richard, for giving you the precious time and we discuss about this book. I would like to recommend all the viewers to read this book. You can download from the Amazon or you can purchase it from the Amazon. This is really an amazing, like you feel like you are watching a movie like a Star Trek. I love that book. Thank you, Richard, for sharing your wonderful journey about this.
Oh, thank you. It's been fun.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Bye-bye.